Angus King III, thank you for joining us.
It's great to be here. Thanks, Rachel.
Angus King is a renewable energy entrepreneur and businessman from Portland. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and why you're running for governor.
Yeah, I think if my name was Bob Smith, people would know me as a guy who worked for the President of the United States early in my life, who then went on to run a number of businesses, was a president of those businesses, ran a renewable energy company, ran a affordable housing company. I built thousands of units of affordable housing across the country, and then I spent time building solar and wind projects across the country and around the world. And then I started a renewables company here in Maine that built a renewable energy project using cow manure and turning that into clean energy, lowering emissions, and not adding costs for people here in Maine. So that's been my history. And in that time, I thought a couple of things. Number one, there was a big chasm between policy and practice where there just seemed to be a gap, and I thought there was an opportunity to be the person who could help drive the economy forward, help understand how it really works in the real world. But then also there's this chasm between politics and people. And as someone who spent their whole career building things and creating teams and getting things done, I thought it was a moment where we needed somebody who could lead the state in a direction that was more bipartisan, that was more, how do we focus on the real central issues to Maine people's lives and get those things done.
So I should mention that your father is Senator Angus King.
But my name's not Bob Smith.
And your name is not Bob Smith.
That's right.
How have people been responding to your family connections on the campaign trail? Do people confuse you with your dad? How is that working out for you?
Yeah, the mustache is usually the easy differentiator, so I don't think people are confused, but people are definitely interested in where we overlap and where we don't. And I think people sort of wonder, what's it like being his kid? And for me, it's really about what have you learned from this person? And I feel incredibly lucky to have grown up literally at the side of what I think, I'm biased, but one of Maine's great public servants and one of our nation's great public servants. And so learning from him about the importance of integrity, of your word, of working across the aisle, of being able to listen to solutions from all sides, and then really knowing how to get things done has been, I think, a great experience and one that I wouldn't trade for the world.
And you mentioned people are curious where the two of you are different on issues. What can you say about that? Are there certain issues where you maybe disagree with stances that your dad has taken?
Yeah, there might be a policy issue or two, but generally we come at things from the same philosophical place, which is what's going to create the best outcome for the biggest number of people, and how are we caring for the people of Maine? And I think when you start from that place, you end up in the same policy land, in the same direction most of the time. So we don't disagree that often on a specific policy, but I think it really starts because we have a very similar philosophy about how you govern, how you listen to people, and how you try and get things done.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit more about your work.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned the Clinton Digester project, which is something that is very interesting to me, but I've also kind of struggled to understand it, and I wonder if other people are feeling that way too. Can you maybe explain that, since it seems like it's one of your key projects that you've worked on, or maybe just give us a little bit more information about your career and the kinds of things you've worked on.
Yeah. So the Clinton project there was a moment where I thought if we were going to have more clean water and clean air and clean energy here in Maine, I thought we really needed to get everybody together into a solution. I think solutions are much better when you've got a solid team. And one of the things that I've learned through my business career is rarely do you accomplish anything by yourself. Rarely do you accomplish anything just winning 51-49 in a vote. You really have to get everybody involved. So I grabbed utility folks and dairy farmers and clean energy and community leaders and thousands of cows. And we took something that they have a lot of, manure, and we turned it into something that we all need, renewable energy. And as I mentioned, that project now is creating heat for thousands of families and factories here in Maine. It's lowering emissions for all of us. It's created some good jobs, and it's doing it without adding costs to Maine families. And essentially what it is it takes manure from 6,000 cows, lets it sit for about 30 days, and energy comes out, sort of clean off the gas and run it into the pipeline system. And so we're using a system that we have, the pipeline system. We're using manure that the farmers already had, and then we're putting it to productive use, which I think is a very Maine thing to do.
Yeah.
And I'm very proud of the project.
You haven't held office before. Is that something that you see as a shortcoming at all? Or how do you, what makes you qualified to take on that different role, like outside of the business world?
Yeah. I think leadership comes from all kinds of different places. And I think of the governor's job as essentially an executive role. Right? It is not a legislative role, it's a leadership role. And a lot of my career has been in an executive role, and I've also spent a lot of my life in, for example, working for the president, in watching other executives in government roles get the job done. And President Clinton used to say that being a governor is the doingest job in the country. And so I think of it as a job where you've got to have someone who knows how to get things done. And to me, the way you get things done is bringing people together, finding common ground, listening, and then having a course of action, and then deploying the right people to get the job done, and then being willing to be accountable for the dollars and the results. So that, to me, is a big part of the job and a big part of my own history. I also think there's an important role for the governor to be the convener in chief. Maine is a small state, which means you really have an opportunity to bring together the thought leaders who really can help you make big decisions and make big change. And we're in a place in Maine where we really need to make some big change. And these problems are not partisan problems, housing, heat, healthcare, and they are bigger than any particular one party or one specific solution. And I think, again, my background is pretty uniquely designed for, or happens to be the right one in this moment. In a moment where we've got a lot of partisan divide, we've got a lot of system failure, having somebody who has seen and solved problems at a system level, has a lot of expertise in housing and energy, I think is exactly the right model for this moment.
Yeah, I do think energy costs are a really big thing on a lot of people's minds right now. And I know that's an area that you've been very proactive in rolling out your energy plans. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about what your energy plans are, how you plan to reduce energy costs for people?
Yeah, they are much too high. If you look at a map of the United States, we're about fourth in the country in terms of cost of electricity, which is a terrible place to be. And I think that's a combination of where we are geographically. We're sort of at the end of some pipelines. We haven't historically been able to access lower cost Canadian power. And we've also had some policies that have made it more expensive to generate energy here in Maine. But we're going to need more energy. We're going to need it to have less carbon. We're going to need it to be soon, and we're going to need it to be affordable and lower cost. So I think of a couple of things. The first is our permitting and interconnection processes are Byzantine and take a long time and add a lot of cost. Other countries have solved these problems. So they're generating solar energy, for example, at 3 times lower cost than what we're doing here. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for Maine to help the people who are generating electricity to do it more cheaply. The second is, what do we do with our utilities? Historically, utilities are incentivized to build things that they then get paid for. And that obviously that incentive makes them build more things. You can't blame them for it, but I think we've got to change those incentives so that they are more motivated to save costs. And they're having success in other states, again, helping them to think about better technologies, better sensors, better utilization of the grid that we have before we start building a grid that's bigger and more expensive. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And then the last piece is making sure we get good deals for Maine. We have not always had energy programs here in Maine that have been good for ratepayers, and I think there's an opportunity. For example, we've got a lot of potential for wind up in northern Maine and more solar, but we've got to make sure, and again, those are going to be low carbon, they can be affordable, and they can be soon, but we've got to make sure that they're structured in a way that are good for Maine ratepayers.
Housing is another big topic of concern for a lot of people. What are your thoughts there on how to make housing more accessible, more affordable?
Yeah, housing is a huge problem here in Maine, and it's not just about the numbers. I mean, people say we're 78,000 units short. Housing costs have doubled in the last 7 or 8 years. So it's a massive challenge for young families who are trying to find a bigger home. It's a challenge for families who are trying to downsize. It's a challenge for businesses who are trying to recruit people. It's really having a big negative impact on the overall economic strength of our state. And I think we've got to be much more ambitious about what we do to build housing. We have made it much too hard in our state to build things in general. I built my own house, or with a lot of help. We built a house in Portland, and it was a very time-consuming, long, expensive process. And I've built thousands of other units of affordable housing that were actually affordable for people across a number of different states. It can be very hard, but I think Maine has made it a little bit harder than other states. We start with some very complicated zoning and building codes. We also have, I think, a not particularly well coordinated series of agencies at the state level. And to me, you've got to start with an ambitious goal, and then you've got to move to who's going to be accountable for trying to get to this goal. And then I think people start rowing in the right direction and making a difference and helping the towns that want to build housing. Right now, there are some towns that don't want to build housing. I don't necessarily want to start by trying to push that rope uphill, but the towns that do want to do it, let's help them. Let's help them with improving their zoning. Let's help them with improving building codes. Let's help them with infrastructure support so they can build their sewer and water programs so that they can actually support more housing. So I think there are a lot of things the state can do, and then there are a lot of things we can do to help the towns and ultimately help. We've got great people in the state who want to build things. I suppose the last piece is we've got to do more and better training. We are short on all of the trades, and I think there's a real opportunity to help do workforce development so that we've got more people who can actually do the work.
Sort of the third piece of this affordability trifecta, I think, is the healthcare issue. Yeah. Where do you fall on that? What are your plans in regards to access to healthcare?
Yeah, I think of healthcare, we both have a cost problem and an access problem. On the cost side, and I think about it in sort of 4 different buckets. The first is around costs. Our healthcare system fundamentally costs too much. And we are delivering care in inefficient ways that ends up being very expensive for people, regardless of who is paying. And so to me, we've got to do more. For example, in Maine, we have about 2 times the number of ER admissions per person that some other states do. What can we do to be more proactive and help keep people out of the ER, which is a horrendously expensive place to be? What can we do at a systems level to try and make sure that we're helping people, again, live healthier lives, and so that they end up not in a hospital, not in some other more expensive care facility? What can we do on early detection and screening, right? So that we're making sure that people are getting care much, much earlier in a disease so that it's cheaper to address. I was talking with someone the other day, if you fall in the shower and break your hip, the medical system will take care of you, but it will be very expensive, right? $50,000 to fix your hip. But if you ask the medical system to buy you a $3 bath mat so that you don't slip, that's not available. It strikes me as something we should be doing more preventative care so that you don't slip and we end up bringing down costs. I also think there's a real opportunity to think about the model of delivery. Right now, it's sort of fee for service. I get hurt, I go in, a doctor takes care of me, and they send me a bill. There is not as much care for the whole person, and I think there's a real opportunity for different models of delivery to help think about people's health in a way that ultimately lowers costs and improves outcomes. And then the last piece is the same thing on workforce. We have a workforce that is really struggling in our healthcare business. And as a result, for example, a lot of hospitals have to use traveling nurses, which are about 3 times as expensive as a nurse who's there each and every day. So the more we can do to support development of that workforce, I think will also help bring costs down and make that profession something that more people want to get into.
This is a crowded primary race. There are 5 Democrats running. What sets you apart? What makes you different from the other Democrats that are running? Yeah,
this has been a great primary, and the people I'm running against are really good people. And we should feel lucky in Maine that we have such good people running. But there is a very, I think, meaningful difference between us. essentially the people who are also running have spent their entire careers in and around state government. And I would not want to take away anything from that service. There's an appropriate time to celebrate that, but I also think there is a meaningful difference between the perspective, the ability to see across systems, the ability to understand what it's like to sign the front of a paycheck as well as the back. And I think there's a difference in philosophy and how you go about solving problems that comes from exposure to both government at the highest levels, but also running businesses, working out in the real world, creating jobs, creating energy, creating housing. I think that perspective, that experience, that breadth of view is something that, again, for the challenges that we have now, if things were working perfectly and everybody was happy, I might have a different view. But these challenges feel very fundamental to us, and it feels like we've got to have a leader who can look across the entire system, bring big groups of people together and get things done, and that's the experience I have.
Angus, thanks so much for joining us.
Rachel, it's a pleasure. Thanks so much for taking the time. Thanks for having me.